What if one of America's most elusive serial killers spent decades living in plain sight, not as a fugitive, not as a drifter, but as an elderly photographer trusted by the people around him? By the time authorities finally uncovered the truth, they realized they weren't just dealing with a murderer. They had uncovered a man whose crimes may have stretched across decades, leaving behind questions that may never be answered. This is the disturbing story of Joseph 𝗏, the man investigators came to know as the double initial killer. Born on January 7, 1934, in Rochester, New York, Joseph 𝗏 served in the United States Air Force before moving to California. On the surface, he appeared intelligent, quiet, and creative. He worked as a freelance photographer and often portrayed himself as an artist. To neighbors and acquaintances, he seemed like an aging man living an ordinary life. But beneath that carefully maintained image, prosecutors later argued, was a predator who targeted vulnerable women over the course of nearly 2 decades. The known murders began in 1977. 𝗏's first confirmed victim was 𝗏𝗏, whose body was discovered near San Francisco. 3 years later, 𝗏𝗏 disappeared before her remains were found in rural California. In 1982, Pamela Parsons was murdered, followed by 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝘀𝗀 in 1994. The killings shared chilling similarities. The victims were strangled, their bodies abandoned in remote locations, and many had been struggling with addiction or prostitution, circumstances that often delayed investigations during that era. One detail stood out above all others. Each confirmed victim had matching first and last initials: 𝗏𝗏, 𝗏𝗏, Pamela Parsons, 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝘀𝗀. Whether this pattern was intentional or simply coincidence remains unknown, but it earned Joseph 𝗏 the chilling nickname, the double initial killer. For years, investigators failed to connect the cases. The murders occurred across different counties and over a span of 17 years. Without modern DNA technology or coordinated databases, the trail gradually went cold. Then, in 2010, everything changed. After 𝗏 was arrested in Nevada for violating probation related to a shoplifting conviction, authorities searched his home. What they discovered was deeply disturbing. Investigators found thousands of photographs depicting women in compromising situations, handwritten journals detailing disturbing fantasies, and a list containing the names or descriptions of 10 women. Detectives believe the list may have represented additional victims, though most have never been conclusively identified. DNA evidence recovered from the crime scenes was compared with 𝗏's profile. The results were a match. The decades-old mystery had finally begun to unravel. In 2013, Joseph 𝗏 chose to represent himself during his murder trial in California. He questioned witnesses, challenged forensic evidence, and repeatedly insisted that he was innocent. Despite his efforts, the jury found him guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death under California law. Yet even after the conviction, investigators remained convinced the full story had not been told. The disturbing writings found inside his home, combined with photographs of numerous unidentified women, fueled suspicions that his true number of victims could be significantly higher than the 4 murders proven in court. However, no additional homicide convictions have ever been secured against him, leaving many unanswered questions behind. Joseph 𝗏 died in prison in 2025 at the age of 91. He took with him the answers to mysteries that investigators had spent decades trying to solve. And for many families whose loved ones disappeared without explanation, the possibility remains that one of America's most secretive serial killers carried the truth to his grave. Imagine surviving a nightmare so terrifying that almost no one would believe it. A terrified young woman burst into an Alaskan street wearing only handcuffs around one wrist. She claimed a respected local businessman had kidnapped her, assaulted her, and intended to hunt her through the wilderness like an animal. At first, the story sounded impossible. But it wasn't. It exposed one of the most disturbing serial murder cases in American history. This is the story of Robert Hansen, the man the world would come to know as the Butcher Baker. Born in 1939 in Estherville, Iowa, Robert Hansen grew up as a shy and socially isolated boy. He struggled with severe acne, stuttered when he spoke, and often became the target of bullying. As an adult, he moved to Anchorage, Alaska, where he built what appeared to be the perfect life. He owned a successful bakery, married, raised children, and was known as a hardworking family man. Few suspected that beneath this ordinary image lived a predator with a horrifying obsession. Beginning in the early 1970s, women, many of them dancers or sex workers, started disappearing around Anchorage. Their disappearances rarely made headlines, and investigators initially saw little connection between the cases. Behind the scenes, however, Hansen had developed a ritual unlike that of almost any other serial killer. Prosecutors later revealed that he would approach vulnerable women, offering money or transportation. Instead, he abducted them at gunpoint, sexually assaulted them, and flew them in his private aircraft into the remote Alaskan wilderness. There, miles from civilization, he released them into the forest. Then he hunted them. Armed with a high-powered hunting rifle and years of experience as a skilled outdoorsman, Hansen allegedly tracked his victims through the wilderness as though they were wild game. For years, he escaped detection. The vast Alaskan landscape concealed both the crimes and the victims. Several skeletal remains were eventually discovered in isolated areas, but investigators lacked the evidence needed to identify a suspect. Everything changed in June 1983. 17-year-old Cindy Paulson managed to escape after Hansen allegedly left her briefly unattended. Still wearing one handcuff, she flagged down a passing truck and told police she had been kidnapped and assaulted by a man who planned to fly her into the wilderness. Initially, officers questioned parts of her story, but Detective 𝗚𝗏𝗀𝗀 refused to dismiss her account. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered that Hansen owned a small aircraft matching her description and possessed firearms consistent with evidence from the crime scenes. Then came the breakthrough. Police searched Hansen's home and uncovered a map marked with mysterious X symbols. Those markings corresponded to locations where several victims' bodies had already been found. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Hansen eventually confessed. He admitted to murdering 17 women, though investigators believe he may have assaulted many more during his years of hunting human victims. In 1984, Robert Hansen pleaded guilty to multiple murders and kidnapping charges in exchange for revealing the locations of several victims. He was sentenced to 461 years plus life in prison, ensuring he would never walk free again. Robert Hansen died in prison in 2014 at the age of 75. His crimes shattered Alaska's image as a place of untouched wilderness, revealing that even the most beautiful landscapes can conceal unimaginable horrors. For the families of his victims, justice arrived, but only after years of unanswered questions, unimaginable loss, and one survivor whose courage finally exposed a killer who believed the wilderness would keep his secrets forever. Every victim had a name, a family, and a future that was stolen. Remembering these stories isn't about glorifying the killers. It's about ensuring the victims are never forgotten and understanding how justice can take decades to arrive. If you found this documentary informative, subscribe to Whispered Pages and turn on notifications. Episode 11 will uncover another true crime case that continues to haunt investigators to this day. Thank you for watching.